Okay, I'm Commissioner Ed Rothstein again. This is our first planning session for ag conservation of, we'll find out how many as we take through. I think this afternoon is more of an overview to
Correct.
set the stage.
Correct.
Okay. And for those watching, as you can see, we do not have Commissioner Wance and Commissioner Frazier. Commissioner Wance may be joining us in a bit, and we will ensure both get all our notes, and we'll go from there. Okay. So, Linda, did you want to start and facilitate this, or?
Yes, please. So thank you, Commissioner. So I am pleased to announce the last two districts of our comprehensive code revisions. We have been working on the amendments to the Carroll County zoning code since 2018. 16. And we brought to you commercial, industrial, employment campus first and the residential districts. Now we're completing it with the agriculture and conservation districts. This is a culmination of a year and a half of work. We started with a work group that we developed made up of different people in the agricultural community, tourism, real estate, to catch all of the bases of some of the emerging trends in conservation and agricultural workings, as well as we had our internal concept team that recommendations from the work group went to and they reviewed, and then to our planning and zoning commission, who spent countless work sessions, again, discussing what be in front of you today, and these are their recommendations to you all for eventual adoption of the county code to finish up, as I said, the complete revision of our county code of ordinances for zoning. This is the first of 3 already scheduled work sessions. Doesn't mean we have to stick to 3. If you need more, we need more. It will be the same process as we did last time. So hot off the presses, and I apologize for not having a memo attached to this, but literally it just happened yesterday evening, are the proposed amendments to Chapter 158 and some minor revisions to 155, which had to occur because of the changes in 158. Are before you. These were adopted unanimously and forwarded to you all with the positive recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And again, this was done yesterday evening. So we will get into the meat of this at future meetings. I just wanted to give this to you today so you can read the summary of proposed amendments, and then we will dig into 158 and then the 155 at subsequent work session meetings.
The agricultural committee, right? How many folks were a part of that?
Price, can you elaborate on that? Price was the lead person, and I can't say thank you enough to really Mary.
So you're not saying thank you to Price?
No, I'm going to say thank you to Price too, but first Mary, because she's put all of this together. She has been the force behind this whole entire effort. So definitely, we could not have done it without her. I mean,
and
did
Price was just there.
Incredible job.
What you're saying? I mean,
Overall, then, give me
Okay,
a minute.
I'm just saying.
Price did an excellent job with leading the Ag Conservation Work Group, as well as Jay and his team, Chris and his team. And when this was completely a team effort and concept team, we could not have done it without Jay and Anastasia's eyes, without Chris and Laura Matthias really being instrumental in the development of this. Specifically for the Ag Conservation, Price, as well as Hannah Weber and Abigail Rogers in our office, did a ton of work preparing for our various work group meetings. Commissioner Weaver participated in many of those meetings. We couldn't have done it without him, so thank you, Price. So if you can explain a little bit about the work group and composition, which will also be in the presentation as well.
Great. So yes, we had roughly 16 total participants. As we had those that were from the county themselves, planning, land and resource management, but mainly we had representation from the real estate attorneys, land and real estate attorneys, from developers, and, as well as realtors, ag preservation, the Farm Bureau, and from the health department, as well as
Soil conservation.
Soil conservation, and the Maryland. That's on.
You're fine. Keep going.
And the Maryland Ag Extension, they were part of it as well.
Right.
And we also had
BZA.
BZA, and what was the other one?
Grow and Fortify,
Grow and
who
Fortify.
is a group that has participated with us in the past for our farm alcohol producers. as well as agritourism. We had our agricultural tourism, Diana Hare participated as well.
So the work group moving forward, and the voice of the work group moving forward, are we comfortable in saying that you're capturing the essence of what the work group want to share, or are we expecting folks from the work group to either be here and or participate
No.
moving forward?
So where we are is that we took the work group recommendations.
Okay.
It was ad hoc just for that specific task to give
Okay.
recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission took those recommendations, reviewed them, and accepted some and modified some of their recommendations because they were just one component of that. Now, what they have digested is coming to you.
The work group, and then to the planning
Planning
commission,
Commission, correct.
and then to us?
Correct.
Okay, yep.
Okay. So again, as I said, we started this effort really in 2018 with the adoption of the Carroll County Master Plan, and right away we began working on the updates, as I said, to the Commercial Zoning and Employment Campus. We finished that up and adopted those districts in 2019. As you know, most of 20 and 2021 we spent on the residential districts, completed those in 2021, and then began this work in late 2021, and now we're into 2022 and finishing this portion up now. So obviously we're in the 2022 Ag Conservation District Work Group. We met, we provided recommendations to the staff and then the Planning Commission, and now it's to you. And the main focus of this was the agricultural and conservation districts, which really make up the bulk, 90% or more of county land. As you can see, well over 200,000 acres of the county is in agricultural or in conservation districts. Not including the municipalities, the remaining 32,000 is in residential, commercial, industrial. So we're really talking about landmass area, the largest portion of Carroll County. So as I said, and we just reiterated, work group, concept team, planning and commission, and now to the Board of County Commissioners. We spoke a little bit about what the mission of that group was, and it's exactly as it says here, to review the agricultural and conservation emerging trends and find opportunities to, change land uses as appropriate as they relate to what's happening within Carroll County and the nation as a whole. So from this work group, the trends and challenges that were brought to them were some of the things that we've seen being part of the review process, part of the Board of Zoning Appeals process, part of the general planning process. We saw these bulleted points as the hot topics that we really needed to address comprehensively in these amendments. So contractor equipment storage yards, country inns, commercial kennel, solar energy, agritourism, temporary and seasonal uses, commercial camping, accessory dwelling units, and ag remaining portions. So, one thing's agriculture is just simply growing stuff or, raising livestock. There's so many more things that can happen in our ag district than just that. And these were the things that we felt from the work group and discussions and research were the big challenges and trends that we needed to address in these districts. So the first one had to do with contractor equipment storage yards, and it was just the number of variances being requested with this use, and the variance has to do with size and distance changes, so either reduction in size, reduction in distance from a neighboring property, things like that. And that's what we'd seen a lot come up in the last few years. There are conditional use already, but then it's just, we've had one contractor equipment storage yard come in not that long ago with 10 different variance requests. And that's a lot. So why is that happening? What is not appropriate with what we currently have and how we do things that is a necessity? So one of the suggestions was, do we introduce a minimum lot size for these contractor equipment storage units in the ag districts? These two maps illustrate where they are and how many variances essentially we've had. So as you can see, the left map, there have been there were 25 BZA cases Now this is eternity, what we have records of, with variance requests for contractor equipment storage yards. And the majority of those properties are less than 5 acres. So the left tells you how many there are. The right map tells you how many are less than 5 acres or greater than 5 acres. So clearly the 5 acre was a threshold that we looked at for perhaps a size on these contractor equipment storage yards. And I'll get to where we ended up as the work group as I go through all of these challenges and trends. The next one had to do with country inns, and our country inn in the ag zone has been kind of our catch-all for any wedding venue or event facility in our agricultural zone. And as we know, in the last, I'd even say like 10 years, those have become very, very popular for hosting weddings, family gatherings, formal events. That country chic is the trend, and we don't see it really going anywhere. They're as popular now as ever. So the challenge was, how do we distinct a country inn and a bed and breakfast right now? That was an issue in our code. And then creating a standalone name and definition for event facility. So again, the definition of country inn is any dwelling in which rooms are rented to paying guests for an overnight basis that serve meals daily. And the country inn is the allowance that allows for these types of events to happen. A bed and breakfast does not. That simply is a place to put your head down at night. So what do we need to do here to make an event facility happen without the country inn as part of that allowance? Another big issue we have seen is commercial kennels. A lot of people, especially over the pandemic, acquired new pets, and we have been getting a lot of requests for commercial kennels. The map shows variance requests and lot size variances over the last 30 years or so. Some of the issues are neighbors' complaints, barking dogs, too many dogs, traffic coming in and out of properties that are more rural or conservation in nature but still have residences nearby. Should there be a minimum lot size introduced with that?
All dogs should be like Chewy. I've never heard that dog bark.
I wish I had that trouble. Agritourism and seasonal uses. Agritourism, too, is something defined recently by the Maryland General Assembly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And please, Price, if there's anything I'm forgetting, or Mary, please jump in. How can we encourage agritourism and seasonal uses in the zoning code? It's something we want to have supportive services and uses for agriculture. That's really important to help subsidize their efforts for farming. And should we define agritourism in the code? As we were working through this last General Assembly session, correct me if I'm wrong, that's when they approved the definition of agritourism. So it came from something that we were just talking about in general to something that the State General Assembly defined for us and said, okay, now you need to include this. So it moved from our discussions were to now we had to do it regardless of whether we moved forward with this or not. And this just are illustrative maps of, some agritourism stuff that we have in the county. In addition to the fun barn quilts, which, just brings people out, our countryside as they're driving through. We also have pumpkin patches, Christmas tree farms, seasonal corn mazes, seasonal fruit picking, seasonal flower picking, strewn throughout the county. So that is something that's growing in demand. Another issue, and we really were, we touched this very peripherally to see if we actually even should have further discussion on this. As you all know, over the last several years, we have expanded the allowance of solar across the county in our commercial and industrial districts for solar energy conversion, how we calculate it for residential uses, how we calculate it for accessory uses, and then how or if we should be allowing it on agriculturally zoned land. There's a great demand for solar energy conversion, not only in this county, but nationwide as we need to move to new, cleaner, greener technologies. So you all had made a decision working through the Environmental Advisory Council to expand as a pilot study solar on agricultural remaining parcels of 20 acres or less to have these solar energy conversion facilities. And then you put some parameters to tighten that up even further. I think they can't be how many more than 5 acres total, and they have to be for community solar, so they have to be the smaller megawattage. So this was our first test ground into that. There was not a lot of requests or outcry to expand this. The work group and the planning commission felt very strongly what was just discussed and debated and eventually approved by you, the Board of County Commissioners. Let's just stop right there and let the pilot study work. Let's see how that pilot study works, and if it's successful or needs to be expanded, let's determine that after the study, pilot study is complete. And how many years is that for, Chris? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't believe we set a duration
Okay.
for the pilot study. It's just, that's the current code.
Yeah.
And we've talked about coming back and revisiting it after it's been in place for a couple of years, but it's really only been in place for a year. And it's only been relatively recently that we've started seeing an influx of these proposed projects. So
We haven't had one project officially come through.
it's to a completion, but we have at least, I want to say, 3 or 4 that are in the pipeline.
Right, yep. So again, as Chris, we just want to let that come to fruition, see how it plays out, see what the pros and cons are before there's any other decisions that have been made. So again, the work group and planning commission felt like, let's just maintain status quo here. One area of great debate and discussion where the work group was really split, but planning commission had many discussions on this topic, has to do with accessory dwelling units. Currently in our ag zone, we allow 1 or 2 dwelling units, or 2-unit dwelling, I'm saying that correctly. 2-family dwelling, thank you. So basically you have a duplex in the ag zone or an attached accessory dwelling. We do allow detached accessory dwelling units in the ag zone, but you have to have a subdivision right. What is being proposed now is allow the attached with parameters, allow the detached within parameters, but you don't have to have that land subdividable. And Planning Commission had a lot of discussion over this and made recommendations on how to move forward with the detached and attached versions of accessory dwelling units. We felt planning really introduced this because with the housing shortage nationally, with issues with affordable housing, this is a way to offer affordable housing, choices and opportunities and other living opportunities that are more in line with Carroll not having multiple apartment buildings or high-density housing. This is a way to incrementally add the ability to have those types of more affordable dwellings in Carroll County.
Doesn't that also create more subjectivity and loopholes on how these dwellings could be used? I mean, are we not opening up too much different ways to look at these type of dwellings, or no?
Well, when we get to it, you'll see when it was only allowed to have detached on subdividable land, there were not parameters, because if it was subdividable, you could just build another house.
You
and
could have a whole
subdivide-
house.
Yeah. But what the Planning Commission decided to do, and they discussed it as recently as last night, was they're going to recommend allowing the detached, but having the same size limit of 1,000 square feet that is for the attached. 2-bedroom limitation, again, which they have for attached, has to be on at least 3 acres, can't be more than 50 feet from the house, so it will truly be detached. I'm sorry, truly be accessory. So I think in taking away the requirement for a subdivision right, they tried to build in some guardrails to keep it an accessory. And also, and this is in the current code, the property owner has to live in at least one of the dwellings, either the main house or the accessory. And that's all to keep it from actually becoming a second dwelling. Nobody's trying to open this up so that you can get a second dwelling.
Double density and
Right, it's just,
unintentionally.
so the size limitation, the bedroom limitation, the restriction on the lot size, the distance from the house, all those are intended to
And that's
keep
my
it that way.
concern, is getting it to where we're increasing density in a community, like it has a different effect than what we're trying to achieve.
So if you look at the picture illustration in front of you, basically we already allow pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This would allow picture 1. That's the difference.
What about some of these farms you see that are old where they actually have a house trail on it? Is that grandfathered in? Is that illegal? Because you occasionally see that where there's a farm and they have a house trail on it.
Commissioner, that's basically for tenant help. You're allowed to have 2 mobile homes on a farm of 50 acres or more for tenant help or immediate family members. But they have to be mobile homes, they're not regular houses.
So that's codified already? Okay.
That's been in
That's
the
all I was
code for
wondering.
years.
I thought maybe they were all illegal out there and they were
No.
grandfathered in. Okay.
They're not allowed less than 50 acres, I think.
Okay, I got you.
We
Thank you.
had a lively discussion on this topic, and I think it was brought up, the people originally doing it did it for a good reason.
Right.
When they sell the property, then's when the problems
Right.
pop in. The next owner, and they have this extra house that they're
Mhm.
not using for the kids, they wanna rent it, or divide it and sell it, or
Right.
something there, so. They came up with a really good, I think, solution to deal with detached or attached dwellings on the property.
And just to add, we're making no recommended changes to the residential zones. So, which, I mean, because they are also allowed in the residential zones, but still only if it's on a subdividable lot. So this wouldn't affect anything in a growth area or, again, any of the residential districts.
So moving on to the next was the ag remaining portions. I know Commissioner Weaver particularly had an interest in this, so we did a deep dive into agriculture remaining portions. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because it's an interesting thing because we have remaining portions and ag remainders, 2 different things. But the term is used to refer to property that has been subdivided and has used all of its residential development potential, but is able to be utilized for other non-residential uses. So the solar, community solar, is one of the uses that are going on these types of agriculture remaining portions, as well as religious establishments, schools, daycare, vet, contractor, commercial kennels, nursing homes, a whole litany of other things that are not really agriculturally related. So we thought, let's take a look and see how much this is in the county and kind of get an idea. So this is some examples. So we have like Golden Crest Assisted Living, and what's interesting about this example, and I'll get into, we don't have any limitations in our code about how many of these you can have on ag remaining portion. You could have, as you can see, there's 2 on Golden Crest Assisted Living. You could have a church on there too, as long as you could fit it. You could have a school. In addition to those things, we don't have a limit. It's just whatever can be put on that land. So this remaining portion that was supposed to be agriculture, how is it really being divided up beyond after its residential densities have been removed?
How large of a space is that for ag? How large of an ag remainder is that?
Of which one?
Golden Crest.
I don't know. I don't know.
This is kind of where we,
I know.
I think, fall apart in this. The ag land has already had its use for housing or
Right,
whatever.
right.
This is what's left over. Now we give everybody another bite at the apple, coming back with all these other uses on these partials, which are the remainder ag at that point, which probably should be. So that could be a topic of discussion here. Should you allow all these other uses now to go back, and they've already used that land for one thing, and it should be remainder, now we're letting it be used for something else again. So you're actually dividing it twice, subdividing.
No, I understand. A lot of these properties, because ag remainders, you and I have talked about this some, that are in designated growth areas.
Some are.
Some are. Few, but some are. And they're limited to what they can and cannot do. If we're pushing designated growth areas to grow, then we may want to look at how those ag remainders are and give them potential for further growth
In a growth area.
in a growth area, only in a growth area.
Outside of a growth area, would you limit these?
Yeah.
uses.
Yeah, because the growth areas, are designed to do just that.
For that.
So you have those 8 municipalities plus the Freedom area that are growth areas, and they've been defined. So why not take a look at those growth areas, the 9, and relook at how ag remainders can be used? And at the end of the day, I would expect you're only looking at a handful.
You'd
I mean,
only be able to influence the freedom areas.
Right, correct.
Because
I
the
would
others
not-
would be related to the town's zoning.
Right, okay,
whatever
so
they-
then the Freedom area.
So I hear what you're saying, but my suggestion would be then perhaps rezone those properties and not leave them agriculture and give them additional density. I would rezone them then to what that is, to residential or commercial, because they're zoned agriculture, so why would we be allowing more subdivision on something already zoned agriculture as a remaining portion, which they have the ability to do now. You can come in, or we could even rezone ag remaining portions to residential, then they get all that residential development capacity because they're no longer agriculturally zoned.
So you can take an area that's been purchased, and there's an ag remainder on it. And you can have that rezoned as residential?
It's not
You go into
protected.
minor subdivision and take a small portion and divide it, which is a fallacy, I think, in our program here. Take a 100-acre parcel, you cluster your houses to one area, you still have,
Right.
that'd be 5 houses on that, or 7, whatever came out. Now you have the remainder, which should have been agriculture, but now you go in through subdivision or one of these others and use it again, another portion. Perhaps you could even
Yeah.
go to the third.
So, I mean,
So it's whittled down. So that kind of defeats the purpose of the zoning. I mean, there's a loophole. And it's what it amounts to.
So you can and you can't. So I'll just say this. In our growth area, the Freedom Area is an example, we have ag remainders. We have like a couple.
Right.
But they can't, even if you do rezone them to R40 or R7500, without water and sewer, you can only subdivide them to 7, period. That's it.
Subdivide them to what?
7 lots, that's it. You're only gonna get 7 more, which you can do. So if you wanted to say, okay, you have a 20-acre ag remainder in the Freedom District, you wanna rezone that to R40,000, you're only gonna get 7. You're not gonna get more than that. You're not gonna get 20 because there's no infrastructure. Everything within infrastructure has the ability to be on infrastructure. There are no ag remainders.
Within that remaining portion.
No, it
you can
cannot.
Fall in one of the other categories here.
No, because it would no longer be considered an ag remainder.
Not if you changed if you changed the zoning to residential. In Linda's example, you're changing the zoning on the entire 20 acres, this mythical 20 acres.
Yeah.
You do the whole thing, changing the zoning, or only a portion of it?
Well, whatever they come in with, that would be your decision if you wanted to do it, let's say comprehensively, quote unquote, or if there was a change or mistake that came in, whatever they came to do. So that, but the law is very specific about how many times you can subdivide, so to get more than the 7, they can't keep indefinitely subdividing and take 7, 7, 7. That's not how it
No, not
works.
777, but 7, something else.
If
Then-
it stayed as an ag remainder, they could get their 7 lots, and then they could put a church on it if there was still room.
Then they
Is
put a
that what you
church or
mean?
a school and the other
Yeah.
thing, so they get actually
Right.
3 bites at the apple on that portion where,
And that's the risk you run, right?
Yeah.
So you could,
Leaving
they
it
could
as an ag.
rezone, and that's how it is now. You can rezone it today, get the residential additional density off of it, and then if you leave part of it as ag remainder, you could probably still do a church or a school or something like that on that portion. But before we have this doom and gloom scenario, I do want to show you it's not what you really think it is. So I'm
I don't know
building.
if that's doom and gloom now. I mean, that's not doom, I think that's,
Well, I guess I'm thinking that we have this wave of ag remainders not being used for agriculture because we really don't.
no, that's my whole point, is it's not doom and gloom. We're talking really limited ag remainders that.
No, I'm saying we don't even have it now, though. Even as
Right.
wide open as it is, we don't have a lot of ag remainders becoming something else. So, how many ag remaining portions are non-residential use? So, only a little over 1%. So we have 1,000 acres in ag remaining portions, 16 of which are non-residential acreage, and that's only 1.57% of that. The total remaining portion Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah,
Hold on.
the
Sorry,
one's
you-
the percentage, the one's the acreage, but the top one is the number of
The-
portions.
oh, I'm sorry,
So the acreage
number.
is probably
Okay.
more
I'm sorry.
relevant.
Right, so the acreage. So we have 23,000 acres in remaining portions. 394 are non-residential, and that's at 1.65 acres. The top is the number, so only 1.57% of those are non-residential. So really, it's not a big deal. Like, I guess what I'm saying is we don't have a lot. It's not like every ag remaining portion, or even half of them, have a non-agricultural use on them. It really has been
Do you
maintained.
actually mean non-residential or non-agricultural?
So it's a little weird, I think, how it's written, because the residential's already been taken off. They're not residential, but they're not. They're these other things here.
You could actually say commercial.
Commercial uses,
But it's also
yeah.
institutional and everything,
Right,
so
but
that's
that-
why it's saying non-residential.
So 1.65% of the remaining portions are one of these
Correct.
commercial uses.
Correct.
The 90,
Probably not the
whatever,
best wording.
99, 98 point whatever percent are
Okay.
just agricultural.
Correct. Thank you. Yes.
Just making
That is
Would
exactly
need to be
it.
an
That
attorney
would
to
be for-
figure all this out.
For future use, though.
It's potential.
There's
I mean,
potential, right? So
potential
you still
there,
have 23,000
developer starts,
acres.
land gets tight, oh, well, we got all these,
Yeah,
then they come back and start looking at these remainders.
no doubt.
It could shift in the future.
Yeah,
So
very quickly, if things get tight.
the gray shows all the ag remaining portions in the county, and as you can see, not a lot are actually in the growth area. Sorry, the mouse here. Yep. So you can see this is the Freedom area. I mean, there might be a one or two, but
Over
most.
by 97.
Yeah.
Towards the west side.
Yeah.
there
Yeah,
is.
not a lot. Mount Airy, so the growth areas really don't have too many. The dots represent the ones that are those more commercial type of ag remaining portions.
So, yeah, the ones I'm looking at are the ones in the Freedom area along 97.
Yep.
And they're significant. I mean, enough for folks to want to do something with.
Sure.
So if we made a decision recently, disable and baited property, on how we were lessening the density, in those properties, which was counter to the Freedom Plan and as a growth area. So now where can we make up some of that space and some of that growth? And can that be done in some of these remaining
The problem
remainders?
there is you're not gonna get any density because there's no infrastructure. And there,
Well, there's no infrastructure now, but it's planned infrastructure.
no,
Outside of, on 97?
No.
it's in very far future.
Yeah, we don't have any water and sewer, and we
Phone service.
don't have it to go out there. We don't have the infrastructure to facilitate
I
that.
thought it was planned in the future years.
No, not for any of the ones that would be the ag remaining portions. Do we have some that go out past Sykesville? Yes, very limited, and those are very, very long range. Like, we would need a major project to happen to do sewer there. Water is not as big of an issue to get it to some of that, but I know what properties you're talking about, and we don't have anything close by.
Why not use well and septic?
You can't, that's the law.
You can, but you're limited then to the
Thank
seven
you.
lots.
Yeah.
That's state
Right.
law, yeah.
Do they know they can get those 7 lots? All those that have ag
I'm sure they
remainders?
do.
I'm sure, I mean, and I will say, so they did. So they did ask for a land use change during the freedom planning process.
Right.
And
The board at the
the
time took
board,
them
yep,
out.
chose not to do it.
And they chose not to do it because? Question mark.
Maybe, I don't remember
I
any
would think, I would
particular
think,
reason.
There are multiple, to be honest, I don't think there was
But-
one solid answer. I can't say one.
but
I think infrastructure and the
Yeah.
availability
Yeah,
of it
right.
was the biggest.
So if the reason was associated with infrastructure and because the other properties were going to meet the objectives and the goals within the Freedom area, why add, that to it? We moved the goalposts on the Beatty and Zabel property, lessening the density. So why not increase or allow for more density in other areas? And,
Well, again, you could change the zoning, but then, but that still would only get 7 lots.
more than what they got now.
Right.
But that's all, but we're focused on one property, but there's other properties that may have enough ag remainder space?
Not in the
There's
figure.
like, there's three.
Okay, so that's 21. It's more than I had before. I mean, if we're looking at density, you know, in designated growth areas, I don't know. Can you let me know after those three properties and where they are? That'd be good. And, yeah, and then what they can and cannot do at this time.
And I would
Well,
say.
now they couldn't develop with residential under the, because they're ag
Correct,
remainders.
'cause they're ag
they've
remainders,
already
they're
got-
done.
They would have to have a zoning change, and then they'd be limited in
And
terms
the
of.
zoning change would be a request through
they-
planning and zoning?
Or it would be
Or
part of
just-
a comprehensive
Mm-hmm.
plan, one or the other.
And I would just say this, you know, our growth area, would we want to extend resources for 1 acre lots? I don't know if that's the best use of water and sewer, so you would want densities that are commensurate with water and sewer to expand out there if you're going to
Well, we
do it.
wouldn't be expanding out until very future use. I mean, that's the whole Piney Reservoir idea. But to allow for well and septic to meet their needs, at least it gives us more density. And then
Gives you more units. I wouldn't say density, I think we're talking.
more units,
Yeah,
okay,
more
that's
units.
fine. Yeah, if you can capture what I'm asking,
Okay, sure.
send me a note, I appreciate it.
So again, just kind of going back to wrap up the non-residential remaining portions, which are more commercial, we have 3 daycares, 5 churches, 5 assisted livings, 2 recreational uses, and a small airport, not our airport. You know, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about, that there were certain assumptions with ag remaining portions that it has been built out to further development, and there's been opposition when further development occurs. Certain uses may not be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and there is no limit, as we said, on the number of uses that may be placed on a remaining portion. So you could kind of indefinitely, you know, roll through what's allowed on the ag remainder.
With the population changing in age, you know, assisted living, you know, being a necessary here in the county, are we meeting the requirements? And you may not be the one to ask that specific, but I'd be curious, are we meeting the requirements for assisted living? Because we were talking about assisted living earlier in C3 or whatever it was, or whatever. Industrial, and we said no. Are there other locations where assisted living can meet the requirements? I mean, again, it's a
All the
a
other zones,
problem.
right?
Every other zone.
So,
Allows it.
so the problem is the growing population. The solution is assisted living. Do we have enough space for assisted living in the county?
Well, that's
The answer
different
is
than
yes.
age restricted
It's a
too.
good question.
So you have assisted.
Well, earlier it said assisted living.
No, I'm talking with this. I wasn't sure if you're getting at the age restricted.
No,
'cause
I'm looking at assisted living. I'm not, I get the age restricted, but assisted living and independent living, that kind of stuff, and, you know.
Yeah, consider the demographics we're faced with in the near future.
And I would say this, and I know you don't want to hear this, but, you know, as we get ready to embark on the next Carroll County Master Plan, one of our recommendations is to do a comprehensive housing study, because we don't know. We
That's a
don't know
really good
where we're
idea.
short. And
Yeah.
we do need to know where our housing stock falls in terms of age and how satisfactorily fits.
Yes.
So we have to do a robust housing study. So I really can't answer, do we have adequate, I mean,
When is the master plan?
we have a timeline, well, we're beginning now with the economic development study. I have RFPs back for that, and we're gonna kick that off this fall.
Yeah.
But 2025, we're gonna start,
Okay.
2024, and but the 25 fiscal year, start the master plan.
Great, it's right in the meat of the new board.
Yeah, the assisted living, you know, and this, I know one, they have, what, 88 bids, I think, or something,
Yeah.
on an ag remainder for assisted living.
Right.
That is, wow, huge. I mean, when you look at that, that's on well and septic at that point, because an ag remainder. Those type things need to get looked at are limited. You know, the small 8 to 10 beds is not so intrusive like the ones you showed. But when you get the huge ones like that, that really makes impacts.
Yeah, it looks more commercial and things, and you may not
That's
want it
commercial.
kind of
I mean,
look.
that is huge at that point.
And we do have one coming, I think, forward on the planning commission agenda this month, right, Chris? The herd? Which was an ag remaining portion and is an assisted living facility
I
in
believe
the
that's the
ag
one
zone.
Commissioner Weaver's.
Pardon me?
I believe that's the one Commissioner Weaver's
Yeah,
speaking
and
of.
Hampstead
Correct.
Ag,
Yeah, and you
Yeah,
actually-
that's,
It's huge.
yeah, yeah.
It's-
And access to the roads there, it's going to be a mess in what I see in it.
5 buildings with 16 beds each, and you actually drive through a
A residence.
residential subdivision,
Yeah.
which I think has 7 houses. It was one of those to get to this one.
Yeah.
Correct.
And our current code allows it, so it's obviously,
Well, I know, and I think on the road you're going to see, I mean, you have paved cow paths through there, and they're going to get pounded hard. But anyway, these type things is where we need to limit
Right.
that, so in the future. And
so, some of the options that had planning commission consider were to make no recommendations, recommend prohibiting further development on ag remaining portions altogether, recommend prohibiting certain intense non-residential uses on these, or recommend limiting the number of uses allowed on a single portion. So for instance, one use for every 10 acres. So say you have like a 20-acre remaining portion, you only get 2 that you could do, putting some kind of caps in place. Or limit the different types of uses or the number of same uses. So in this case, with that one property we're talking about, there's 5 buildings. So here, we would say maybe limit it to 2 or 3 of that same use. Just some things that we were throwing out for consideration for this particular issue. So, those were the main topics, and I wanted to do a deeper dive on this because I know Commissioner Weaver had a lot of, you wanted us to look at and discuss it. So now I'm going to get into where the recommendations fell from Planning Commission, where their discussions ended up with everything, so that way we can, that way where we start with this and how this got to be where it is, the actual code itself. Maria, did you want to go through this part, or?
Luckily, you have it there.
Luckily, yes, and that is basically,
struggle on that one.
yes, and that was,
And you have it in front of you.
have it in front of you. It's pretty much cut and pasted from the summary of proposed amendments. So I will just briefly, I'm sure you don't want to have a detailed discussion on any of these, especially without your other 2 commissioners here. But the first thing we started with, as with all the districts.
No, go ahead. I was going to go back and show the picture so we can go back to the challenges.
Was the definitions, which are really arguably the most important part of the code because they set everything else up. So we created a new definition for agritourism that is very similar to the new state of Maryland definition. There is one significant change, and the Planning Commission discussed this at several meetings. Commercial camping, also called hip camps, there's a few other names for them, were left out of our definition because we were recommending that that use remain conditional and all other agritourism is going to be permitted. At the request of a citizen who came in, they added that back into the definition but limited it to 1 campsite. So that's no change from the current code. You could still have that type of camping with just 1 as a permitted use. Anything more would kick you into the commercial camping category, which is conditional use with a number of other requirements.
And that was to make it more inclusive in the zoning code itself, why they felt very strongly, and that's fine. We understood once they came in, they spoke to us and spoke to our planning commission, the person who was concerned, felt that that was appropriate to add that in specifically.
We also clarified the definition of attached accessory dwelling, and that was at Jay's request to make the administration of what is considered accessory clearer to people, whether or not it's connected to a breezewood and breezeway. And again, I won't get into too much of this. It's on pages 1 through 4. We revised building height to be consistent with the building code. We addressed a problem that the BZA sees often, which is the difference between commercial sawmill and other accessory wood processing operations. So we created some new definitions and new regulations. One of the most significant things that we've been hearing about for years is we've deleted the definition of country inn, which, as Linda said, is the means of having the wedding venues. That is now going to be called what it is, a banquet and event facility, which will still be a conditional use in the ag district, but not in the conservation district, and we found there were no active ones in the conservation district, so we would not be creating non-conforming uses. But this way, when people see Country Inn, they'll know what they're seeing. It's an event banquet venue.
Right, so we still kept bed and breakfast, but the Country Inn required someone overnight stay. And this eliminates that, because really, what's it being used for? It's being used for an event. It's being used for a wedding or something like that. So let's just call it what people are using it for, and currently doing just under the guise of Country Inn.
Sure. Then we also created definitions for food processing and packing plant, which is actually an industrial use that is currently allowed in the ag zone, but we kind of refined it to being food processing and packing of agricultural products. Again, to be more what you usually see in the ag zone. We created a definition for garden supply center, which is already similar to what's in the code. We clarified the definition of livable floor area, which was important to the regulation of the accessory dwelling units. And then we clarified the definitions for livestock incineration and slaughterhouses. And
No, I just said let's stop after the definition. No, go ahead.
okay, again, we'll get into that at probably the next work session. That's kind of a detailed discussion.
So that kind of concludes the definitions that we changed.
Other than some very minor cleanup, I tried not to include every last thing we did, but these are what will be of interest to you when we start next time, probably with going through these first, pages 1 through 4 at least. Then we also relocated all the distance requirements from the previous ag and conservation districts. We tweaked a few of them, but there are no major changes. You did receive a comment, I believe, from Marty Hackett regarding that that was an actual change we made that we will discuss next time with you for the contractor's equipment storage. That's an actual change, so I've noted that we'll discuss that next time. Again, with the other districts, we amended the purposes of them to more accurately reflect the future land use definitions in the adopted plans, which is very important. Again, it's the basis for all of the decisions in the use table, really. And then, as with all the other districts, we have created a single table of uses for principal uses, which you are now used to seeing after all this time. A few of the additions were we added agritourism. It's permitted in the agricultural and conservation districts. Just last night, the Planning Commission had a lengthy discussion about that and made that decision. We have made private schools and daycare centers conditional in the conservation district. Again, there was quite a discussion on that, whether or not they should even be allowed there, but they fell on that it should be conditional. We changed country into banquet event facility, and it's conditional use in the ag, but prohibited in the conservation.
And the reason we did that was, and you'll see this theme throughout, is in reevaluating the use table and what's allowed in ag versus conservation. We made very deliberate decisions via discussions with the Planning Commission and the work group to tighten up conservation. Conservation had a lot of allowable uses, and that's our conservation. So those are the more vulnerable lands, have more steep slopes, more forested, streams, you name it. So we thought it was more appropriate to have that be under a little more scrutiny with development.
And you'll see that when you go through the use table, there's a number of things that'll show up as permitted in the ag and conditional in conservation, or conditional in ag and prohibited in conservation. So they're not interchangeable districts, and we want to make sure when we review it, that's not lost just because we're considering them together.
Correct, thank you.
And then we have a whole individual section now for all accessory uses for these two districts. Again, a lot of this is reformatting of what's in the current code, but as with the other districts, it's going to make it easier to find, easier to understand, more standardized with the other zoning categories. I think at this point, you probably don't want me to go into great detail on all these, because we will be doing that when we go page by page. Probably the most significant thing, I would say the theme of what we did here was we tried to solve a lot of the problems at the BZA and at the zoning administrator level in interpreting some of these uses, and we added things specifically in that will help on all sides, people who want to do these as well as the zoning administrator understand what's expected in this use.
And we had Melvin Bale from the BZA.
Very helpful.
Not only in our work groups, but also in concept team. extremely helpful. So he really gave us insight onto how the BZA looks at things. And so, when something's been kept as a conditional use, Melvin had really good reason for why he felt that was really important. He had really good rationale for it. So again, I know we were trying to have consistency and not arbitrary decisions, but there will be nothing arbitrary about how these decisions are made for conditional use approval. And that was a really great help to us in this process, since we do see so many of those non-agricultural uses tend to be conditional in ag.
Yeah. Definitely applaud the use of the work group and the insight that you, along with the others, provided to set the stage. I mean, I think we had a very strong, skilled group of folks with a lot of experience that then can take it to the planning commission, then to take it to us, so.
Yeah. I think the work group worked very well on this. And there, when you went to planning and zoning, then things were relayed. And even then, there's still a lot of controversial issues here to be talked
Sure.
about, yeah, but
The surrounding jurisdictions, as far as their codes regarding agriculture and conservation, I'm sure you have a sense, or if somebody goes from one jurisdiction county to another, is there a feel like they would understand, the different counties' codes, or is it?
Yes, I mean, but the two surrounding jurisdictions are much different in how they operate with their code and the amount of zoning districts.
okay.
Like Baltimore County does not have a true, what they call ag zone. They have
Right.
the resource conservation districts, and they have different intensities
Right.
depending on what RC that you're in. Frederick County does have an ag district. We're probably a little bit more comparable to them. Howard County does not have a really
Right.
true ag district either. So, but we did always, as we always do, compare Maryland,
Yeah.
our region, and then what are some of the national trends and issues that we do see?
Okay. Great.
So, again, I won't go through the accessory uses specifically because we'll be doing that at another time. We did spend, I said this last night to the planning commission, I think we spent at least as much time on the accessory uses as we did on the principal uses because Jay's nodding yes, they cause an awful lot of problems, headaches. And we're hoping that if we've done nothing else, we've cleared some of that up with just providing clarity and updating some things. And it was interesting. When we get into it, you'll see why we needed livestock incineration.
Very important. It was really important.
Okay, then when we moved down to bulk requirements, we did not, I don't think I have this on the slide, we did not make many changes to this, so that will be a pretty quick review when we get to it. And then the last major section was specific uses. And again, there's a section of our code in different places that have a lot of requirements for a number of specific uses. Commercial camping, contractors' equipment storage, commercial kennels. So we put those all in one place, applying to both the conservation and the ag. Some of them were just basically relocated, but then for some of the issues like contractors' equipment storage and commercial kennels, we took the work group recommendations and some other advice, and tightened things up, made things,
So for contractor equipment storage, we talked about that slide and the 5 acres. So looking at all the patterns and trends and stuff in the county, the recommendation was to have a 5 acre minimum lot size for the contractor equipment storage yard, as well as 3 acres for commercial kennels, feeling that those were really appropriate, looking at the average sizes of these, where they're located, and to limit interference with neighboring properties. Because that's really, at the end of the day, even though they're agricultural lands, some ag lands are very residential and how we've developed them. So you'll have a 1 acre lot with a contractor equipment storage with a row of houses on either side. So setting some of those minimums so they don't come back for those variances of such a size reduction, we felt was important, and that was one of the recommendations that came from that work group, as well as the commercial kennels too.
and I think what we learned from Mr. Bale was we probably haven't solved all problems because every property is specific and things like barking dogs are hard to solve, but we've made our best recommendations. And then the changes to Chapter 55 are really just technical in nature. We tried to make the definition consistent, or we made the definition of attached accessory dwelling consistent with what we had done in the zoning code. We changed a few references. And then regarding cluster subdivisions, last year, you will recall that you changed the process for approval of a cluster subdivision so that an applicant does not have to submit a conventional plan on which to base the density calculation. This just carried that recommendation forward to the conservation zone because what you did last year was only for the residential zone. I would consider this a cleanup or a technical because there's really no reason to be treating the conservation district different than the residential zones, but you'll definitely have the opportunity to discuss that, and Laura Matthias will be here at that time. She was the person who I think gave the best explanation of why that
She
was
did a great job.
necessary.
Excellent job.
So that doesn't look like a lot.
It's a lot.
That is a lot. And we hope to be going over this over the next few work sessions in detail. And I will make sure when we do that, I give you the benefit of the Planning Commission's discussions, any comments we received, the work group discussion.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and we'll forward, I think you received the same comment we did, but we're starting to keep the comments now to forward to you all that we have received on these amendment proposals.
You know, building a house, you gotta have a strong foundation, and that's what this is. You know, it's the definitions, it's strong understanding, and, you know, now we move, you know, from it. My view is the less conditional uses and the less subjectivity in any of these regs, the better off we're gonna be. To make it clear for people to have a understanding of what they are or are not allowed in a specific area. I mean, that's what we did with the others, so this should have no difference. But, yeah, strong foundation. And I know I said it a few times, and I'll continue. The work group and the planning commission is so important to the success of this. So I'm glad that they, you know, fingerprints are all over this. And I appreciate all of their work because it's volunteer, you know, work. So to include you being a part of that work group.
I want to say you guys did a great job here through the work groups, through the planning commission, of putting this together. I think we need some tweaking on some things yet, but overall, you did a great job putting this together to this point. I think this is the best one you've put together yet. I mean, after going through industrial, residential, commercial, and everything, I think this one, you had more input, you did a much better job putting it together.
Yeah, I'll reiterate what Commissioner Alstein said. The more citizen input we have, the better off we are, and the less confusing it is in the end. I must say, I feel like sometimes you guys have Juris Doctorates because there's a lot of text here to go through, and it all intersects, and you move one piece, it affects another. It's very complicated, and we're all very fortunate to have you as staff to help us with this, so thank you very much.
Right on.
Actually, the one thing I would point out is that you mentioned 155 code updates. And you may be aware that next Thursday will be before the board to discuss code revisions there. We recognize that there are a lot of moving pieces here, revisions to 158 being proposed, revisions to 155, and there is some cross-pollination there.
Right.
So our intent is that as we go through and get the approvals from you all for making those adoptions, that when we get to the point of drafting the resolutions, that we work cooperatively but between the chapters so that we can address them all at once and not go through a series of administrative resolutions to clean things,
Right.
to keep things clean.
Right.
So the plan is to address all of them at the same time.
That's a good point. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. I was looking at Mr. Burke, which is a.
We noticed that Mr. Burke discovered a fountain of youth over there.
Good.
Okay.
So next week, you'll pick up with now the actual language, starting with 158 on the 11th. And we also programmed in the 25th. Again, that's not hard and fast. If we need to go beyond that, we will. That's just what we have scheduled so far. Then we'll look to go request a public hearing, have a public hearing, all that good stuff, and then discussion adoption. Our goal in all of this is to have this done with this board that started this effort and finish it up with you all.
Wonderful. That answered the question I had, so thank you.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Cool.
Thank you.